Good morning or afternoon, of course, depending on what time zone you are joining us from. In South Carolina, it has just hit noon, and we are super, super excited to have you all join us. If you're joining us live right now for our How to Register for New Student Orientation live Q&A. So my name is Jonathan Moss, and I serve as the second year graduate assistant for the Office of New Student Orientation. So as I mentioned today, you're going to hear from some of our staff members on the camera and a few behind the scenes. And we're really excited to have you all join and ask your questions and learn how to get registered for your new student orientation session in the coming months. And so, like I mentioned, the purpose is just to ask any questions you all may have regarding how to register. And to get us started, I'm going to pass it on over and let our wonderful staff that are on this webinar introduce themselves, starting with Allison.
Hey everyone, my name is Allison Leach Hughes. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I serve as the Director of New Student Orientation here at the University of South Carolina. Huge thanks for joining us today. We're excited to talk to you a little bit about new student orientation and what you can expect in the registration process. So now that you've heard a little bit from me, I'll turn it over to David Flowers in our office for his introduction.
Hi guys, my name is David Flowers. I serve as the office manager for the Office of New Student Orientation. I've been with our office for about 7 years now. Seems like a ridiculous amount of time, but I've been doing it for a long time because I really, really love what we do. So thank you guys for joining us today.
Yes, and so basically to get us started, we're going to have a few kind of what we call icebreaker questions that Allison and Flowers will answer that I'll be asking. But during this time, feel free to go ahead and send in the questions you may have. They may be answering them in a few moments during these icebreaker questions, but you can go ahead and interact and ask your questions. Via your screen, you will see a large green interact button. You can go ahead and hit that and you can type in your questions. And like I said, we will be answering those either via chat or live after we kind of break the ice. So to get us started today, our first question is, what is orientation and is it mandatory for incoming students to attend?
I will go ahead and answer that one. Orientation is a really cool experience that all new students get the opportunity to be a part of. Yes, it is a mandatory program. We require all incoming students, whether you are a freshman or a transfer student joining us, to attend new student orientation because it kind of lays the groundwork for what is to come over the next couple of years as you begin your journey at the University of South Carolina. This is where you will actually learn about campus, all of our different resources, what some of our acronyms are, because we love a good acronym on campus, as most college campuses do. But you'll also have the opportunity to meet other folks that you're going to be going to classes with. You'll meet with an academic advisor and learn what are some of the academic requirements for your specific major or your college, as well as actually registering for courses at New Student Orientation, which is, I think, one of the things that a lot of people are looking forward to because it becomes really real at that point in time. But orientation is a lot of fun too. You have opportunities to connect with fellow students, as I mentioned, current students that are serving in a mentor role as orientation leaders. We have a lot of fun programming that happens, Gamecock After Dark, at our campus rec facility. So I highly recommend going into it with a really good, exciting attitude and asking a lot of questions because that's how you'll get the kind of the most out of the new student orientation experience. The other piece of that I didn't mention is the family or supporter role that happens during new student orientation. And so, yes, we have an orientation for freshmen and transfers, but we also recognize the fantastic supporters that have helped all of our incoming students get to this point. And so we welcome all families, guests, and supporters to join us for orientation as well. There's a concurrent program that happens at the same time as the student sessions, and we do highly recommend at least one family member or supporter attending new student orientation with your student. If you think about it, it's a lot of information to take in. It's always nice to be like, what did you hear about that? I forgot, or I forgot to ask that question or something like that. So there's some really cool sessions that you'll go to together, but also some specific sessions designed specifically for students and then specifically for families and supporters.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison, for answering that. So our next question is, when does registration open and or close for new student orientation?
Absolutely. So new student orientation, most of you probably know because you're on this webinar already, but registration opens on Monday, March 27th at 12 o'clock noon Eastern time. So definitely pay attention to that for all of our folks in different time zones. That's when the registration portal will open and you'll be able to log in and actually register. And we'll talk to you a little bit about how do you actually do that in a little bit. And then we highly recommend getting into that portal earlier, the better. And then recognizing that we're asking all incoming students to register for new student orientation by May 12th. That sounds a little early, but we're really asking for you to do that so we can adequately prepare for your orientation experience to make sure you have the best experience possible. So March 27th at noon for when it goes live. And then you have all the way up until May 12th to register for your new student orientation session.
Wonderful, super exciting. Registration opens so soon. And so, David, I will ask you, how do I register for new student orientation?
That is an awesome question. I see a couple people in the chat have also asked pretty much that verbatim. So to register for orientation, you'll do that through you or your student's Self-Service Carolina account. Most likely, if you have been accepted, you probably have been on this website before. That is my.sc.edu. So again, that's my.sc.edu. And that's really going to be a great platform for everything that you need to know about registration, not even just for orientation, for everything, for housing applications, for class registration that will be housed through Self-Service Carolina. So you're going to want to get comfortable with registering or signing into that platform earlier, the better. But now is a great time to do so with orientation. So you'll log in with your network username and your password. You should have gotten that when you apply or when you got accepted to the university. You would have gotten that over from admissions. If you have any questions about that, you can give us a call. We can figure that out with you. Once you've signed into your Self-Service Carolina account, either you or your student, you will click the Admissions tab, and then right under that, Orientation Services. So again, Admissions and then Orientation Services. It's going to ask you to select a campus. Obviously, you'll select Columbia. And then it'll bring you to a page called My Task List. Now, this task list is going to cover everything that you need to do prior to attending orientation. Not necessarily for classes. There may be some additional things for classes, but just for orientation, this task list will feature everything that you need to do. This will have information like submitting your immunization records, submitting your citizenship residency verifications, all that kind of confirming your major. You may have changed your mind about your major that you applied with. So that would be the time to do all of that stuff. The first thing on that list is going to be registering for orientation. So it'll say complete my orientation reservation. You'll click on that and it'll walk you through the whole process. It's pretty straightforward from there, just a basic registration process. But there are a couple things to note. 3 really important things. Number 1, this will be when you register family and guest members. So during the registration for orientation, once you select a date, either as a student or if you are a supporter of your student, there will be a family and guest registration. We do strongly encourage parents, family members, guests, any kind of supporter to come along with their student to orientation, make sure that they get all the information that they need. Obviously, it is not required. Parents and supporters are not required to attend with students. Only the student is required to. But we do strongly encourage that parents come along. We got a lot of good stuff for you. We got a whole separate program just for parents and guests, so do tag along with us. But that registration is done with the students' orientation registration. This will also be when you can tell us about any accommodations that we need to be aware of. We are more than happy to extend any reasonable accommodations to both students and parents and guests. That can be a dietary restriction, a mobility restriction, a site restriction, anything that we would need to know at orientation. Whatever you're comfortable disclosing, but that'll be an option during the registration as well. And then last but not least, if you have one specific date in mind, which I would recommend you don't, I would recommend you have a couple dates in mind that you would be available to attend. If the one date that you have in mind is full or not available, then we just recommend signing up for the next available The only dates that are available for you and your student will appear during the date selection process of the registration. So if you're not seeing the date that you had in mind, that likely means that either your student population or your student's major does not have availability for the session, or that we've capped out and we will not be able to see you for that date. So just make sure you have a couple different dates in mind that you would be available to select from. And yeah, that's registration. So again, just to recap, I know that was a lot. You'll go to Self-Service Carolina. That's at my.sc.edu. You will log in with your student username and password. You'll select admissions, orientation services, and then it'll walk you through the registration from there.
Perfect. Thank you for explaining that, David. And I see a few questions. Do I have to log on at noon on March 27th to register for orientation? What if I am unable to?
That's a great question. No, by no means do you have to get in there right at noon on Monday. Obviously, if you have a specific date in mind, a very specific date in mind, we would recommend that you try to. Not to say that any of the dates fill up super quickly, but to say that just make sure you get in there in peace of mind and get that session as quickly as you can. If you're not able to get in right on at noon on Monday, do not worry. We don't close an hour after. We're not closing that day or anything. We don't close until May 12th. I don't even think we have a time on that. Allison, correct me if I'm wrong. Do we have a time on that? No. No. So once you get, if you need to do Tuesday, by all means. If you need to do the Monday after, by all means. Do keep in mind that sessions are a first come, first served basis. So again, if you do have a very specific date in mind, try to get in there as soon as you can when we do open at 12 o'clock on Monday. But don't feel as if you have to.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I know this was kind of briefly touched on, but Allison, could you kind of elaborate a little bit more? So what if the session that I want or maybe is at capacity, or the second one I want is at capacity? What should I do?
Absolutely. Flowers addressed this a little bit already and gave some really good advice of if you can, please come in with a couple of dates in mind that work with your schedules. But a little bit on the back end of what we do as we get ready for orientation season. We know that the summer months are super busy. You are graduating, you are maybe wrapping up classes from a prior institution. You are hopefully going and taking some time to take care of yourself throughout the summer and do a family vacation. And just a lot of celebrations are happening. So we try to be really strategic in the dates that we pick for new student orientation. And this year, we're actually starting even a little earlier for some of our folks that are out all summer long. We have a couple of sessions in May and highly do recommend those. But you will see orientation sessions starting in May, mid-May, all the way through the end of July. And really, I think there are over 20 different options available, depending on your student type, of course. And so I highly encourage having a couple to go in mind with and see which ones are available, and being prepared to potentially change some plans if you absolutely have to. Hopefully those aren't that's not the situation that you'll find yourself in. Usually we have dates that are flexible enough for folks and we can work with you. But if you're not able to get in immediately, I encourage you to book the closest available date, which is what Flower said a minute ago. And then the nice thing about our registration system is that you can actually monitor the session availability in real time. So going ahead and getting your session set up, but knowing that you might want to shop around on your date a little bit. And there's no harm in doing that. And as we know, some students are still making decisions on where they want to attend for college. And so some folks might cancel their session or might be doing the same. Didn't realize that they had a vacation booked and now can't make it on the original date that they signed up for. So as they move throughout the system and pick a different date, those dates become back available for you. One thing to keep in mind, though, is capacities and sessions. And Flowers alluded to this a little bit. Our sessions are set up in a way to make sure that we have space for academic advising, that we have space in our actual buildings, that we host new student orientation in, our residence halls, our transportation, so on and so forth. And so there's a variety of factors that go into how many people can attend an orientation session based on their major or their college, so on and so forth. So if I was registering for an orientation session and maybe Flowers was registering for an orientation session and I wanted his date and he wanted to give it to me, if we're two different majors, we might not be able to switch our dates out like that. So that's why it's real time and available to you. You can always log back into the system and see what is available. And the system will only show you dates available to all the different capacities that are factored in. So long story short, I hope that you will be able to find a date out of all of the different options that we do have available for you. But at any point in time, if you do want to discuss options or, just troubleshoot an issue, we have a whole team of fantastic current students that were also former orientation leaders that work in our office and are able and willing to help address any questions that you have or give you any insight into the orientation experience in general. And I think we'll be able to identify solutions in that regard as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Allison. So I see quite a few questions about placement testing. Where do I kind of find the links for that? Do I get those links after I register for orientation, as well as AP and IB scores, and how those kind of play a role when I attend orientation and register for my courses?
So when you register for new student orientation, you kind of have a task list within your registration portal, and it'll tell you all the things that you need to do before attending new student orientation. And placement testing is one of those big pieces. There's the foreign language placement testing and also the math placement test. And so there are more details on how to actually log in and complete that within the registration portal, as well as AP and IB scores. Some of you might still be enrolled in classes or might not have the results of those tests by the time you come to new student orientation. And please know that is totally okay. What we ask students to do in that regard is to do their best guess. So AP testing specifically, if you think you're going to get a 4 on that test, communicate that with your academic advisor and let them know. And depending on what the subject is and all the data that they have available to them, they're either going to recommend for you to go ahead and move up to the next course or potentially register for the lower course and then drop it later on and switch it to whatever it may be once we have the official test scores in. So no harm there. That is totally okay. I do always highly recommend bringing a transcript with you, even if it's an unofficial transcript, just so you have a documentation of all the different courses that you've taken in high school or even your former institution, any of those accelerated credit pieces. But placement testing definitely covered within that task list. Please pay attention to the task list because it also talks about things like immunizations, citizenship, all of those things. We try to put it in one location for you. And I know admissions has also done a really great job. They have a fantastic guide that kind of walks you through that as well. We put it in a few different places because it's super important and it can impact your ability to be able to register for classes once you get to new student orientation. So just pay close attention to all the requirements listed there. And if you are needing to take some of those placement tests, you do so ahead of time before coming to new student orientation. Our kind of rule of thumb is at least 2 weeks before, but really if you are still at that 1 week mark, you still need to take it. Please make sure you take those things and get everything squared away so you can have the best orientation experience possible.
Perfect. Our next question is there a cost associated with attending new student orientation? And if so, what is that cost for students and what is that cost for a family or supporter if they decide to attend as well?
I'm happy to hop in on this one as well because I'm actually building the sessions within our registration system right now. We have multiple types of orientation. We talked about this a little bit. So for our freshman students, it's a $250 orientation fee. And for our freshman families, it's $115. For our transfer students, it's $130. And for our transfer families, it's $50. And those fees cover a variety of different aspects of our program. One of the most popular things that probably all of them include are food options when you get to new student orientation. So the fee itself supports all of our office functions, as well as our staff, and the materials, the food, the space rentals, so on and so forth. We're a total self-funded office to help you transition to the university. And so that's what those fees support. And for our freshmen specifically, that $250 fee does cover overnight accommodations in the residence hall on campus. And you'll find more information about which one you'll be in and everything like that once we get into the registration on Monday. But that would include overnight accommodations for your 2-day orientation experience. So one night in the residence hall. And for our families, that does not include any housing in those orientation fees. It just includes the program materials, the staffing, and the food, transportation, and so on and so forth. So for our families attending, you would want to make your own accommodations. And we've got a lot of information that our marketing and communications folks have worked out with various campus and community partners to tell you about some of the different places you can stay in Columbia. We also have an option where if you would like, you can stay on campus in a residence hall, not with your student, but that would also be an additional fee. And there's more information on the website about that. For our transfer students and our transfer families, that fee is for the program materials and food and everything like that. It does not include any overnight accommodations as well. And so we'll give you some information on, again, where you can book within the community to stay off campus. But those are the fees outlined and everything you can expect for the different types of programs that we have.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Allison. So if I was a student coming to new student orientation and I wanted to stay the night before, because I'm traveling from a little bit of a distance, am I able to do so?
Yeah, so I can hop in and answer that for sure. So the way that we do it, if a student wants to stay the night before or the night after an orientation session in the residence hall that they would be staying in for the night between day 1 and day 2 of orientation as a freshman, they're welcome to do so for an additional fee. We don't have an exact figure of what that cost will be just yet, but we will during the registration process. But yeah, if say you're flying in the day before and you want to stay in the residence hall, again, that you will be staying in during your day 1 and day 2 stay, you're welcome to do so. And same goes for the day after if you're flying out the day after orientation. For families and guests, we do have an option as well to stay in a residence hall. It is a separate residence hall from the one that the student will be staying in. And that can be for any of those 3 nights as well. It can be for the night before, during, or after. Do keep in mind it is a residence hall. It is not a 4-star hotel. So keep that in mind when you're coming in and make your expectations the same. But it's a nice option. It's very convenient. It is on campus. It is for an additional cost. To reiterate what Allison said, it is not covered in the family fee. The only overnight accommodation that is covered in the fee is the student between day 1 and day 2. That is covered in the freshman $250 orientation fee. But again, for an additional fee, you can stay the day before, after, or if you're a family member or guest supporter, any one of those 3 days as well.
Perfect. Thank you for answering that. I've seen quite a few questions about when is new student orientation. I know you all talked a little bit about, we have lots of different sessions over May, June, and July, and what that kind of looks like.
Yeah, so we definitely have orientation sessions happening in May, June, and July, as Jonathan just mentioned. We have 2 that are happening a little earlier this year in May that we have not done in the past for our freshman students. We recognize some of you might still be in classes. That is totally okay. Again, we want to make options available for all the students that we have coming into USC this summer and starting with us this fall. So late May, I think it's the 3rd week in May, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a really good option. All of our dates are listed on our website, which is sc.edu/orientation. So highly recommend going and checking out those dates and starting to pick some of the ones that we talked about. We also go all through the month of June and July. And traditionally those orientation sessions take place between Monday to Friday. We always get a few questions of why don't we do any weekends? And truly, truthfully, I wish we could. When you think about the timeline of orientation and the number of partners that it takes to coordinate an orientation program, that would require a lot of folks to work on the weekends, and unfortunately, availability just isn't there. So we do a Monday to Friday based new student orientation. Most of them are going to be either Monday, Tuesday for our freshman sessions, or Wednesday, Thursday, and then some of our transfer sessions will take place on Fridays. But we do have a couple that are sporadically placed in there in case you want to try to make it a long weekend or something along those lines. And I do highly encourage getting familiar with Columbia and getting to experience the city if you can as well. I know it can be a little expensive to do another visit, but this is the visit that will kind of solidify things for our students, get them enrolled in classes, and hopefully conceptualizing, where they will be living and going to school. So it's a really exciting time as well.
Absolutely. So a few questions about students who maybe honor students or capstone scholars. What are their kind of requirements during new student orientation?
So we do have some specialized populations that we work with throughout new student orientation. Capstone Scholars is one of those, opportunity scholars, of course, our honors college, and so many others, Carolina Life, Palmetto Pathway. I cannot truly list them all. So we have an orientation for you, regardless of what that population is. So if you ever don't know, website is a good resource to look at, but also feel free to call our office and ask. More generally speaking, to the question that was asked about capstone or honors, we do have some specified sessions for honors students. There's specific dates, so you'll want to make sure that when you're registering, you look closely at dates, because some of those are only available for our honors students, or if there's honors programming happening during those specific dates. Hopefully that makes sense. But you will have a meeting with the Honors College and have the opportunity to connect a few different times with them, which is really great. Families of honors students will also have an opportunity to connect with the Honors College and enjoy a lunch with them. And so traditionally it goes hand in hand with our existing programming. It just might have a specialized date for the Honors College. And then for capstone, for instance, there is a capstone meeting throughout new student orientation on day 2 for all of our freshmen. And that includes both students and families. And welcome capstone to come and tell you a little bit about what it means to be a capstone scholar, and meet their staff, and tell you about some of the program requirements for that. And then all of our special populations typically have like a one-off meeting or something along those lines. So it's important to read through all of the information that's located on the website. If you are in one of those more specialized populations or specialized sessions, so you know what to expect. And we'll give you, of course, a schedule once you get to new student orientation that'll outline everything and tell you exactly where to go as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Allison. So David, if I'm a student, am I allowed to leave new student orientation early? Do I have to be there for the 2-day programs?
Jonathan, people can go whenever they want. No, I'm kidding. Unfortunately, every aspect of fortunately, actually, every aspect of orientation is required. Don't worry, we don't waste your time. We make sure that everything that is a part of orientation is very, very important information that you need to know before you start classes. And that goes for families and guests as well. Excuse me, let me reiterate. It's not everything is required for families and guests, only for students. But no, students are required to go to every aspect of orientation in order to get registered and advised for classes. However, we do understand that there are some travel accommodations that might need to happen. What we would recommend in that circumstance, though, if flights are only for about 5 o'clock, because we do recommend that you plan to stay until 5 o'clock on that second day of orientation if you're coming in as a freshman. If the only flight out that day is for 5 o'clock, we would just strongly recommend that you move it to the day after. We do have a airport in Columbia, a local airport. That doesn't mean that you'd be able to get there and get through it very quickly. We try to recommend building in as much time as possible and planning to stay until 5 o'clock on that last day. The same goes for our transfer students. 5 o'clock on that day of orientation, we will be keeping you. So just plan for your day accordingly. Try to do your travel plans accordingly as well. it's when that good option for staying the day after in the residence hall really comes to play here is if you want to fly out the next day, that's totally okay. But do keep in mind that you do have to attend all aspects of orientation and plan to be with us until about 5 o'clock that day after, or that second day.
Perfect. And Allison, if I'm a family member or supporter, please give me a little bit of an elevator pitch as to why I should attend and participate in new student orientation.
Absolutely. Well, you get to hang out with me a little bit, which I hopefully is a good thing. I hope most families would say it's a good thing. One of the benefits of new student orientation for family members is the opportunity to kind of catch a glimpse of what your student will experience during their time here at USC. I think one of the things that families consistently say is, I had all of these questions and I left and every one of them was answered. And that feeling of assurance and knowing that your student made the right choice to attend USC, and that in a worst case scenario, if they have questions or need someone to like help them problem solve or figure things out, they've got a point person on campus. And so I think that in and of itself is one of the main reasons why to attend. Plus, it's a really good opportunity to form a connection with other folks, especially for our out-of-state family members. Maybe you want to coordinate a carpool or something similar. That's a really good opportunity to make some connections during new student orientation. Get all your questions asked and answered. One of the things that I like about our new student orientation program is that some of our sessions, students and families are together during the session itself. And then some of them are specific to the families. And we have a really honest and hopefully very helpful presentation that focuses on the transition that you and your student will go through during the college experience, and what different resources that are available to your students. Because we know that just because your students enrolling in the university doesn't mean that they stop being your student. And we want to help coach you throughout that process and give you and your student as much support as possible and resources to help them be successful. So I do highly recommend it. Plus, I'm not going to lie, Columbia in the summer is a really cool place to hang out. So come enjoy and catch a glimpse of where your student will be living in the fall semester.
Perfect. And do I have to be committed to the University of South Carolina in order to register for new student orientation?
You do. Our freshman students are required to pay an admissions deposit. So please make sure that you are doing that as soon as possible. If you haven't done it yet, our recommendation is that if you want to register for orientation first thing on Monday at 12 as it goes live, you'll want to make sure you do that sooner than later. It does typically take a day, maybe 2 days to process through in the system and get you fully integrated into the registration portal for orientation. So we say 24 to 48 hours ahead of time. So if you're logging in and you just recently had paid your admissions deposit, that might be why you're not able to fully log in. Our transfer students are not required to pay an admissions deposit, so you should be able to log in and register for your new student orientation date accordingly. But we do encourage you to go ahead as soon as you know that USC is exactly where you belong, which we hope it is. You can go ahead and pay that admissions deposit and then start your registration process for orientation. Quickly, I will say that this year we do have a cancellation policy. So if you register and you decide USC is not your end destination, if you cancel your orientation reservation within 2 weeks of your orientation session, you can submit a request that will be reviewed to be able to determine whether or not you would be able to get a partial refund. So just want to be really transparent about that policy as well.
Perfect, thank you. So after I register for new student orientation, what should I prepare to wear to my orientation session? I see we have a lot of questions about that.
comfortable clothing. The joke is that Columbia is famously hot, which is really telling. Plus, it's summer in the South, and so you can expect a little bit hotter temperatures for sure, and also an unexpected rain shower that you could probably like set your watch to. We say it's unexpected, but you know it's going to happen about 2 p.m. every day. So I highly recommend comfortable tennis shoes, walking shoes, something along those lines. A lot of students and families and supporters will wear like a t-shirt and athletic shorts or a polo or something similar. Do whatever feels most comfortable to you. Obviously, we want to make sure that you feel good. I want you to remember that you will be going from outside to then inside, and we love good air conditioning in South Carolina because it's necessary. And so you might want to bring a light jacket or a sweater or something like that that you can utilize, and then definitely an umbrella or a light raincoat or something similar, because it can be unpredictable in regards to weather. For our students specifically, we do have some like evening things, Gamecocks after dark, and you'll definitely want to bring like tennis shoes for that to get the full experience. We have a rock climbing wall. It's pretty cool. You can play basketball. We've got an outdoor pool at our rec facility, and so highly recommend just making sure you're comfortable throughout that process too.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and touch on, I see a lot of questions about selecting courses at orientation and what that kind of looks like. I'll go ahead and answer that myself and preface this. We will be having 2 webinars, which we will talk about at the end of this one ending, just to recap. But we have 2 upcoming webinars that talk a little bit more about how to prepare for your orientation session and what to expect. Those will be April 10th at 5:30. That's for freshman students. And then we will have one April 26th for transfer students. We will specifically have 1 or 2 staff members from the University Advising Center during those webinars. So that would be a great time to really come and ask those questions, and we'll make sure that we cover that as well, just regarding your class schedule. But 100% you will get a full solidified class schedule if you have come to orientation, done all the steps that you've needed to complete that we ask you to when registering. So our next question is, how do room assignments work at new student orientation?
Yeah, sure. So they are done at random. Unfortunately, you cannot select a roommate or request one for your time at orientation. Bright side is it's only one night, though. Fortunately, there will be a lot of time built into the orientation session. Say you attend with the roommate that you're planning on living with for the full year. There's copious amounts of time during the orientation to get to know them, spend time with them, including at night when we have all of our evening programming during the orientation session itself. So they will be done at random. Obviously, if there are any kind of special accommodations that we need to be aware of, that's something that you can notify us during the registration process. So either you can put that into special accommodations, or you can give our office a call or shoot us an email, and we can work from there. But room assignments are done at random.
Yes, perfect. And if something comes up after I register for orientation, am I able to reschedule?
Yes. So rescheduling happens all the time. Stuff comes up. People go on vacations, all that kind of good stuff. We totally get that. So it's a pretty easy rescheduling process. It's basically you just log into the registration portal the same way that you made your reservation the first time, and you can just switch your date. You'll go in through Self-Service Carolina, like I discussed earlier, the Self-Service Carolina portal at my.sc.edu, select admissions and then orientation services, and then you can change your date from there. You're also more than welcome to give us a call, shoot us an email. We're happy to help you out in that regard too, and manually do it over the phone if need be. But obviously you can do it on your own if you need to. That can be done at any time, at least 2 weeks prior to the actual session itself. But if there are any extenuating circumstances, just give us a call, and we're happy to help you out in that regard as well.
Next question is, let's see, I'm registering for orientation, where can I find my immunizations form to make sure that's complete before I attend?
students should be able to identify that within their My Health space. So once you've been admitted, there's more information on the task list once you've registered for orientation. Gives you a list of all the things to complete. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but it'll redirect you to your My Health space, and that's where you'll be able to upload all of your immunizations. It is truly as easy as uploading it. I think for some students, it trips them up because it's a separate platform outside of their like my.sc.edu account, which I totally get. So just make sure to follow the instructions within that and update your immunizations, because that is one of the holds that will stay on your account, and that might prevent you from being able to register for classes at New Student Orientation. We try our very best to help you and make sure that you get through, but in some situations we're not able to get that hold lifted. So do yourself and us a little bit of a favor and go ahead and make sure that is uploaded within 2 weeks of your New Student Orientation experience. For some folks, they can get that information from their local like health department. You might have to go and get a few other like shots or something like that, depending on when you received those vaccines, so on and so forth. But once you have everything updated, you'll submit it over in your My Health Space portal, and you should be good to go, and that hold should be removed.
We have a few questions about transfer orientation. Is that an overnight orientation session?
No, it is not. So our transfer sessions are built a little differently because it's a different student population. We have to service some different needs. So that is an abbreviated, comparatively abbreviated schedule. So it is only one day. Those are always held on Fridays. We have 3 sessions throughout the summer to choose from for our transfers, but it is only just that one day. We will have you till 5, so expect to be with us until 5 that day. That doesn't necessarily mean you will be with us until 5. The last thing you'll do is meet with an advisor, register for classes. So it could be a little earlier than that, around maybe 3:30 or 4, but do expect to be with us until 5 that day. But it is only one day.
Perfect. Thank you, David. So if I'm traveling from really far away to come to the University of South Carolina, is there some type of orientation session prior to move-in that I'm able to attend if I could not make it in the summer?
We do have an option that is held towards the end of the summer in August. I will give some caveats to that orientation session. You won't see that become available on March 27th, because that is a session that we reserve for folks that truly need it. And a big limitation of that is you're not able to register for courses until you're able to attend New Student Orientation. And so one big limitation is that you would wait until the end of the summer and right before classes to be able to register for classes if you attend that orientation session. So if you're at all possible, we do highly recommend trying to get into one of those sessions in May, June, or July as a first option. And then definitely considering that August date if you absolutely need it. And if you want to discuss that more in depth or more one-on-one, please reach out, call our office, and we're happy to kind of talk about some of the pros and cons of that session. But that will be right before, I think the week before classes start. So definitely keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So a few more questions regarding orientation dates again, and that being based on academic college. So maybe we can touch on that one more time.
Yeah, I'm happy to explain that. I think it's a very common cause for confusion as to why it's based on major. And I'm happy to explain, and we can be very forthright with that. It's based on advisor availability. So the last thing that the students will do, and probably the most important thing to you or your student, is going to be getting that class registration done. And that's the last thing that students do with us. So the reason that it's based on major and why availability is based on major is because we need to make sure that every student is seen during the advisement process in an equal and fair amount as to every other one. So we have certain capacities that we just have to be dictated by based on advising staffing needs within each academic college, within each academic unit. So for example, a larger college with a more popular major, like say business, might have a lot more advising staff put to it, which means that their capacity might be a lot higher. So there might be a lot more students per session for that particular major. The same goes for a less common major that would have less staffing needs or less staffing available. so that the capacity might be a little lower. So that's why we do it based on major. And that's why we cannot go over those capacity limits, unfortunately. Those numbers are pretty set in stone because we want to make sure that students are all getting the equal amount of time during the advising process as possible.
Perfect. Thank you for that explanation. So if I'm a student and I register for my orientation session and I have a family member or supporter that wants to tag along and I didn't register them when I registered myself, am I able to go back and register that family member or supporter?
Yes, absolutely. Please, we want you to, please. Yeah, so that can be tacked on at any time. If a student wants to add on any kind of family member or supporter, they're more than welcome to do that after the fact. You don't have to make that decision when you're sitting there doing the student's registration. I would urge you that if you have a certain date in mind, go ahead and you don't know if your supporter or family member wants to come along just yet, go ahead and finish your student registration. You can go back and add a family member or guest or a supporter at any time. Make sure you go ahead and get that student registration done. We see that every now and then people will miss out on a date that they want because they weren't sure if their mom or their dad wants to come along with them. So go ahead and finish that student registration. You can add a family member later on if you want to, or you can just knock it out when you go ahead and finish the student.
Yes, absolutely. We want family members and supporters, like David said, to come. So if I'm a student and I'm unable to come to orientation until later in July, will I still have classes to be able to get registered for?
Yes, we are really always emphasizing making sure that students leave with a schedule that is degree applicable. The caveat that I will say is you might not love the times of classes that you will be registering for, but that's also not a guarantee that they're all going to be like 8 a.m. classes, because obviously you can't take all your classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 a.m., right? So there are some fantastic academic partners that are behind the scenes of new student orientation and the university in general, monitoring class and course availability and making sure that we have enough math classes based on the number of students that we have coming in, so on and so forth. And if they say, hey, we need a little bit more, they're going to release a few more here and there, depending. So you will typically be able to get all the classes that you need, and we'll work with an academic advisor to be able to determine, okay, I was originally going to take this history class in my first semester, but it's full. I'm going to sub my English class in this semester and I'll do my history class next semester. That way you're still taking degree applicable classes that count towards graduation, and you're not taking like underwater basket weaving. No offense to that, but you're doing something that's going to get you to graduation, and not just hanging out and having a good time at USC, which we hope you're doing as well, but classes are important. So that is kind of the thing to keep in mind. The nice thing too is that we have kind of a policy, if you will, that is add and drop, so you can continue to customize your class schedule throughout the first few days of classes. So maybe you did get into that math class that you really wanted, but it's like a 10 a.m. math class and you were really hoping for like a 1 p.m. math class, right? Really up to you, and depending on how you learn best, and if you are really reliable with your alarm clock, because going to class is super important. In that case, if a 1 p.m. one opens up, you can just switch into that session instead, without any issue, and be able to kind of continue to customize your schedule. And a lot of students will do that as they maybe change their major, or maybe decide to take a different math class as well. Some of those will kind of trickle down and you'll be able to get into different classes. So typically getting classes is not the issue. It's landing on the perfect schedule, which I would say for any student, even if you come to our very first orientation session, you might not have the perfect schedule leaving, but all of your classes will be something that will help you progress to graduation, which is the most important piece.
A few questions about how many students will be attending each orientation session.
Roughly, we have anywhere from about 350 to 400 students that attend each orientation session, or at least that's the max capacity that we can handle during new student orientation. Depending on date availability, some sessions might be a little bit smaller. I also think about our transfer student population and how that might be a little bit lower than that 350, 400 mark. I would say most of our sessions last year hit around 200, 250. So you will be definitely hanging out with a good group of your peers. But also, one of the things that I love about our new student orientation program is that whether you're a transfer or a freshman coming in, you're assigned an orientation leader in a small group. So it's not as overwhelming of being around 400 people. You're really working with about 15 to 20 students where you can ask questions, get to know your orientation leader that is a current student, they've enjoyed during their time here at USC. How do they get from point A to point B, or how to navigate the bus? Like all of those like intricate details that are going to come better from a student perspective that has lived it and done it. Those small groups are where kind of the magic happens, in my opinion. So yeah, it can be a larger group of individuals, but you'll also have the opportunity to connect on a more individual level as well.
Perfect. I know we have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to only have time for a few more questions. But no worries, if we didn't get to your questions today, we will put up a slide of our contact information. I'll go through that towards the end of this webinar. Our next question to cover, if I have a special accommodation or I have a disability services request, how do I go about doing that when I'm registering for new student orientation, or if I have an accommodation or somebody that I want to talk to about a disability at orientation?
Yeah, and I can speak on the just the special accommodations for the orientation purposes, and then I can throw it over to Allison for after that fact. But for orientation, whatever we need to know, essentially whatever you think that we need to know when you're registering, if you have some kind of special accommodation, that can include a dietary restriction, that can include a mobility issue, a site issue, anything in that realm that you feel comfortable disclosing to us, we're happy to have a conversation with you about reasonable accommodations for orientation purposes. Again, it is just 2 days. Keep that in mind. So we don't need to know everything. We're not going to be serving lobsters, so don't feel the need to tell us about a shellfish allergy in that regard. But tell us whatever you think that we need to know for orientation. And that's done during the registration. So when you register for orientation, there will be a whole tab for special accommodations, at which point you can select what kind and then give us all the details that we need to know. And if you have any questions about that during the registration, please give us a call. We're happy to discuss that further.
And in regards to post orientation, and actually it happens at new student orientation as well. We have a fantastic student disability resource center here on campus, and they'll be present during new student orientation. And we'll definitely take the opportunity to connect you if you have any questions. Want to make sure that you're set up for those dietary restrictions that David was talking about, or the mobility concerns, anything along those lines. If you need it during new student orientation, you might also need it in the classroom setting as well. And so we would love to get you connected with the Student Disability Resource Center, or what we call the SDRC as an abbreviation. They'll be located in our resource fair and throughout our orientation program in general. And they will set up an intake appointment so you can talk through what are some of those reasonable accommodations that are going to help support you as you explore USC and start taking classes with us in the summer or fall semesters. So definitely want to take care of that during your new student orientation experience. I highly recommend, and even if you do not currently have accommodations on file with the school or institution that you're attending, please don't hesitate to go ahead and do that. It's always helpful to have them on file because they start from the moment that they are registered. They can't go retroactively. So always a cool point to remember, and make sure to go ahead and get that set up.
Perfect. And our final question that we're going to answer live today before we go into our recap and our contact information is, can either Flowers or Allison kind of elaborate on the timeframes for both freshman and transfer orientation sessions?
Yeah, so our freshman orientation session itself is the 2-day version, as I think we've talked about extensively. You're roughly going to be need to be available from about 8 a.m. on day one, all the way until for students, we have evening programming that runs until about 10 p.m. But there's the overnight component, and I promise it's not like all sitting in sessions all day long. We try to engage you in a few different ways. So 8 a.m. to about 10 p.m. on day one. For our family members, you're going to run from about 8 a.m. to about 7:30, 8 p.m. And that includes dinner and everything like that. On day two, our student programming starts a little bit earlier. I believe we start at about 7:15, get you breakfast, that kind of stuff, and ready for your day. And it will go until about 5 p.m. And that's that date that we encourage, or time that we encourage you not to make any travel arrangements before 5 p.m., especially for our folks that are planning on traveling out of Charlotte. Even if your flight is at 6 p.m., there's truly no way to make it to Charlotte after academic advising within that time frame, or no way to guarantee it. So we ask that you try to do your flights a little bit later, especially if you're flying out of an airport that's not Columbia. For our transfer students, you're going to run from about 7:15 a.m. It's an early start until about 5 p.m. as well. So those are the times we encourage you to block off on your calendars.
Perfect. And we want to thank you all so much again for joining us live today on, hopefully we got a lot of your questions answered about how to register for new student orientation. And just a little recap, you will see some slides and media coming up on your screen in 1 second. But the slide is basically going to recap kind of what we talked about today. So our first major thing is for Monday, March 27th at noon Eastern time. That's when registration will open. So again, Monday, March 27th at noon Eastern time, you will be able to log in through your Self-Service Carolina account to register for your new student orientation session. So super, super exciting. As mentioned earlier, we do have 2 upcoming webinars as well. One will be April 10th at 5:30, and one will be April 26th at 5:30 p.m. Those will both be Eastern time. The April 10th will be for freshman students to get your questions answered about freshman orientations. We will have somebody from the University Advising Center, like we talked about, as well as some other staff members, and we can answer more of your questions on kind of what to pack, what to expect, and how the class advising process works. And then as well, for the same thing goes for transfer orientation, and that will be on April 26th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So before you all log out, we would love for you all to scan our QR code. This is a link to our registration guide, which is also on our website. And I will give you all a moment to scan this, but this is going to give you all the tips and tricks to register for new student orientation. And you can also go back into your portal and watch this live Q&A as well that we discussed today. And then last but not least, we want you all to contact and connect with us with any questions that you all may have. And our website is sc.edu/orientation. Our phone number is 803-777-2780. You can contact us via email at orientation@sc.edu. And then, of course, go ahead and follow us on social media via Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. And check out our Getting Cocky About Orientation podcast.
I'll give one more shameless plug for our registration guide. All of the information that we talked about today is included in it. I know Jonathan has mentioned that, but our contact information, what to bring with you to orientation, how to register, there's so much information. So I do highly recommend checking that out and seeing that on our website.
Yes, once again, thank you all for joining us, and we are so happy to have you.
Have a great day.